They say family is everything, but sometimes family becomes the place where your heart shatters the most. Last Thanksgiving, I found myself staring at a chemical strip turned blood red, proof that someone had poisoned our family dinner. I never imagined my own daughter-in-law would try to hurt me. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Helen, and I'm 72 years old. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment in Queens, New York, where the subway rumbles past my window every few minutes like a mechanical heartbeat. The walls are thin here, so thin I can hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door watching her telenovelas, and the young couple upstairs arguing about money again. Sometimes I wonder if they can hear me crying at night, but then I realize nobody really listens anymore. The scent of street food drifts up from the vendors below, hot dogs, pretzels, that sweet smell of roasted chestnuts in winter. It used to comfort me, all those city sounds and smells. They made me feel connected to something bigger than my loneliness. But now, even surrounded by 8 million people, I feel more alone than I ever did growing up on my grandmother's farm in upstate New York. This morning started like any other. I woke up at 5:30, made my coffee in the same chipped blue mug I've used for 20 years, and sat by the window watching the sunrise paint the buildings across the street in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, but empty somehow. Like looking at a postcard of a place you'll never visit again. I was stirring sugar into my coffee when my phone buzzed. A text from my son Michael. My heart always jumps a little when I see his name on my screen, even though I know it probably means he needs something. Money, usually, or a favor, or both. Mom, Sarah wants to cook the turkey this year. She says you should just relax and be a guest. Don't bring anything. See you at 3. Just like that. No asking how I felt about it. No acknowledging that I've been cooking Thanksgiving dinner for this family for over 40 years. Not since I was married to Michael's father, rest his soul. Not since Michael was a boy who used to sneak pieces of turkey skin when he thought I wasn't looking. I set the phone down and felt something crack inside me. Not break, exactly. More like a hairline fracture in something I thought was unbreakable. You see, cooking Thanksgiving dinner wasn't just a tradition for me. It was my one day to feel needed, useful, important. The one day when everyone came to me instead of me always reaching out to them. When I could fill my apartment with the sounds and smells of family, with laughter echoing off these lonely walls. But Sarah, my daughter-in-law of 15 years, had different ideas. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the old photo album from under my bed. The leather cover is worn smooth from handling, and some of the pages stick together now. There's Michael as a baby, chubby cheeks covered in mashed sweet potato. There's David, my late husband, carving his first turkey as a newlywed, so proud and nervous he nearly dropped the whole bird. There we are together, the 3 of us, when Michael was maybe 8 years old, all wearing matching red sweaters I knitted that winter. In that picture, I'm laughing at something David said. My eyes are bright, alive. I touch the glass covering my face in that photo and barely recognize the woman staring back at me from my bedroom mirror. When did I get so small? When did my shoulders start curving forward like I'm trying to disappear into myself? I closed the album and held it against my chest. Those were the days when I mattered. When my opinion counted for something. When people listened when I spoke instead of checking their phones or cutting me off mid-sentence. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, suffocating. I needed air, so I grabbed my coat and walked down to the bodega on the corner. Miguel, the owner, smiled when he saw me. He's one of the few people who still treats me like a person instead of an inconvenience. Mrs. Helen, how are you today? You getting ready for Thanksgiving? Oh, family gathering. I couldn't bring myself to explain that I'd been demoted from chef to guest in my own family's tradition. That's nice. Family is everything, no? I nodded and bought milk I didn't need, just to have an excuse to talk to someone who was glad to see me. On the walk home, I passed the church where David and I were married 48 years ago. The steps are the same gray stone, worn smooth by decades of brides and grooms and mourners. I sat there for a moment, remembering. David would have understood. He always said Sarah had a streak of coldness in her, even when Michael first brought her home. "Watch that one," he whispered to me after their first family dinner. "She's keeping score of something." I thought he was being overprotective, jealous maybe of sharing Michael's attention. Now I wonder if he saw something I was too hopeful to notice. Back in my apartment, I tried to make sense of this new arrangement. Sarah had been taking over more and more family decisions over the years, but this felt different, more deliberate, like she was erasing me piece by piece. I thought about calling Michael to talk about it, but what would I say? "Your wife hurt my feelings by wanting to cook dinner?" It sounded petty even to me, and I knew what he'd say anyway. "Mom, you're overreacting. Sarah just wants to help. You should be grateful." Grateful. That's what everyone expected me to be. Grateful for the scraps of attention they threw my way. Grateful for the hurried phone calls and the obligatory visits. Grateful to be included at all. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning my apartment, even though it was already spotless. When you live alone, there's not much mess to make. But cleaning gave me something to do with my hands while my mind churned over Sarah's latest slight. The truth is, I've been feeling pushed aside for years now. Little things, mostly. Comments about my cooking being too heavy or old-fashioned. Suggestions that I should modernize my recipes. Eye rolls when I tried to share family stories with my grandchildren. My traditions dismissed as outdated, my experience treated as irrelevant. But this, taking away my role as the family's Thanksgiving cook, this felt like the final insult. I remember when Michael first brought Sarah home for dinner. She was polite enough, complimented my pot roast, and asked for the recipe. I thought she genuinely wanted to learn from me. I spent hours teaching her my mother's techniques, sharing the little secrets that make food taste like love, how to season the gravy just right, why you should let the turkey rest before carving, the importance of cooking with your heart, not just your hands. What a fool I was. Over the years, Sarah started improving my recipes, adding ingredients I'd never heard of, changing cooking methods that had worked perfectly for decades. She called it putting her own spin on things, but it felt like she was erasing me from my own family's traditions. And Michael always took her side. "Sarah's just trying to help, Mom. You should appreciate that she cares about making good food for the family." Appreciate. Grateful. Those words started showing up in every conversation about Sarah, as if I should thank her for dismantling everything I'd built. The phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Michael's number again. "Hey, Mom. Listen, about tomorrow. Sarah wanted me to tell you not to worry about bringing anything. She's got everything covered." "I always make the cranberry sauce," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "It's my grandmother's recipe. Sarah already bought some at the store. The fancy organic kind. She thought you might want to just relax for once." Relax. As if cooking for my family was some kind of burden I needed relief from, rather than the one thing that made me feel useful. "What about the stuffing? I could at least—" "Mom." His voice had that edge it gets when he's losing patience. "Sarah's handling everything. Just come and enjoy yourself, okay? 3 o'clock sharp." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, feeling like I'd been erased from my own family's celebration. 40 years of Thanksgiving dinners, and now I was just another guest. Expected to show up empty-handed and grateful for whatever table scraps of attention they decided to throw my way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the sacrifices I'd made over the years, not just for Thanksgiving, but for everything. When Michael was growing up, I worked part-time at an insurance office to help pay for his college. even though David's construction wages were barely enough to cover our bills. I gave up my dream of becoming a teacher because families needed mothers who were present, available, devoted. I nursed David through his heart problems in those last years, managing his medications and doctor appointments, sleeping in a chair beside his hospital bed more nights than I can count. After he died, I was the one who held the family together, the one everyone called when they needed support, advice, money. When Michael married Sarah, I welcomed her with open arms. I helped them with the down payment on their first house, $20,000 from the life insurance money David left me. Money I was saving for my own retirement. But family comes first, doesn't it? That's what I was taught. I paid for their children's birthday parties when times were tight. I babysat every weekend for years so they could have date nights. I never complained when they canceled plans at the last minute or showed up hours late for family dinners. I just smiled and kept the food warm and pretended it didn't hurt. Even now, living on Social Security and David's small pension, I still help out when they need it. Car repairs, unexpected medical bills, the kids' school supplies. Last month, I gave them $800 when their water heater broke, money I desperately needed for my own prescription medications. But what do I have to show for all that sacrifice? A text message telling me my help isn't needed anymore. I got up and made myself some tea, chamomile to calm my nerves. As I waited for the water to boil, I looked at the calendar on my refrigerator. October had been a hard month. My birthday came and went with just a phone call from Michael and a generic card from Sarah. No visit, no dinner together, no acknowledgement that I'd lived another year despite the loneliness threatening to swallow me whole. When I developed that persistent cough in September, Sarah suggested I see a doctor on my own time, as if my health was an inconvenience to her schedule. Michael didn't even ask about it when I mentioned it during one of our brief phone calls. They used to worry when I was sick. Now they barely seemed to notice. The kettle whistled, sharp and urgent. I poured the water over my tea bag and watched the steam rise, disappearing into the cold air of my apartment. Like everything else in my life, beautiful for a moment and then gone. Sitting at my small kitchen table, I faced a truth I'd been avoiding for years. I wasn't valued by my family anymore. I was tolerated, used when they needed something, ignored when they didn't. A convenient source of money and babysitting services, but not worth including in the important decisions or celebrations that shaped our family's life. The next morning, Thanksgiving Day, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with the weather. I showered and put on the navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for family occasions. The one Sarah once said made me look matronly. I applied a little lipstick and brushed my gray hair until it looked presentable. In the mirror, I saw a woman trying desperately to matter in a world that had already decided she didn't. The subway ride to Michael and Sarah's house in Long Island took an hour and 20 minutes. 3 transfers and a long walk from the last station. Carrying a small bouquet of flowers I'd bought despite being told not to bring anything. I couldn't show up empty-handed. It felt wrong, like admitting I truly was as useless as they seemed to think. Their house always intimidated me a little. A colonial with a perfect lawn and expensive cars in the driveway. The kind of house I dreamed of when Michael was small, back when David and I were scraping together rent money and shopping at thrift stores. I was proud that my son had done so well for himself, even though I sometimes felt like a shabby embarrassment in their gleaming world. Sarah answered the door wearing a designer apron over a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile was bright but cold, like fluorescent lighting. "Helen, you look nice. Come in. Come in. I hope you're hungry. I've been cooking all morning." The house smelled wonderful, I had to admit. Turkey and herbs and something sweet baking in the oven. But it didn't smell like home. It smelled like a restaurant trying to imitate comfort food without understanding what comfort really means. Michael hugged me briefly, distracted by something on his phone. "Hey, Mom! Sarah's really outdone herself this year. Wait until you see the spread." My grandchildren, Emma and Jake, barely looked up from their video games to acknowledge me. Emma is 16 now, more interested in her boyfriend and college applications than spending time with her grandmother. Jake is 12 and still sweet sometimes, but even he seemed distant lately, absorbed in his own world of sports and friends. I sat in the living room while Sarah bustled around the kitchen, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Female relatives and friends complimented her cooking, her decorating, her organizational skills. I smiled and nodded along, feeling invisible. "Helen, you must be so relaxed not having to cook this year," one of Sarah's friends commented. "Sarah told us she wanted to give you a break." "Oh yes," I managed. "It's quite a treat." But inside, I felt hollow. This wasn't a treat. It was erasure. When we finally sat down to eat, I found myself at the far end of the table, squeezed between Jake and an empty chair. Sarah and Michael sat at the head and foot, holding court like a king and queen. The turkey was perfectly browned, the sides arranged beautifully on matching serving dishes I didn't recognize. Everything looked professional, Instagram-worthy, and completely soulless. Sarah stood up to make a toast. "I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Michael and I are so grateful to share this meal with all of you. I know I'm not the usual cook in this family." She glanced at me with what might have been an apologetic smile. "But I hope everyone enjoys the food I've prepared with love." The usual cook, as if I was some hired help who'd been replaced by someone younger and better. I took a bite of the stuffing and nearly choked. It was bland, under-seasoned, nothing like the rich, savory dish I'd perfected over decades. The cranberry sauce was store-bought gel, sweet and artificial. The gravy was too thick and tasted like it came from a packet, but everyone raved about it. "Sarah, this is delicious. You're such an amazing cook. Helen, you must be so proud to have such a talented daughter-in-law." I smiled and nodded and died a little more inside with each compliment. After dinner, while the others watched football or played with their phones, I offered to help clean up. Sarah waved me away. "Oh no, Helen. You just relax. I've got this handled." So I sat there, useless and ignored, while my replacement took over the last role that made me feel important. That's when I noticed something odd. Sarah was being very careful about the leftovers, particularly the stuffing. She scraped most of it into the garbage disposal instead of saving it, which struck me as wasteful. When I asked about it, she said it probably wouldn't keep well. Something nagged at me about that stuffing. The taste was off, not just bland, but wrong somehow, too bitter underneath the herbs. I'd been cooking long enough to recognize when something wasn't quite right with a dish. Later, while everyone was distracted by the game, I found myself alone in the kitchen for a moment. There was still some stuffing left in the serving dish, and that nagging feeling wouldn't leave me alone. I thought about my old volunteer days at the community health center in the Bronx, when I'd helped test water quality in local schools. I still had some of those chemical testing strips somewhere in my purse. I'd been carrying them for months, meaning to throw them away but never getting around to it. Almost without thinking, I pulled one out and dipped it into the remains of the stuffing. The strip turned deep red immediately. My hands started shaking. Red meant the presence of something that shouldn't be there. Something toxic. I tested it again to be sure with the same result. Someone had poisoned the stuffing. And given that Sarah had insisted on cooking everything alone, had been secretive about her preparations, and had thrown most of it away. I dropped the ceramic serving spoon I'd been holding. It shattered against the kitchen tile with a sound like breaking bones. "Everything okay in there?" Michael called from the living room. "Just clumsy," I called back, my voice cracking. I swept up the pieces with trembling hands, my mind racing. Had Sarah really tried to poison me? It seemed impossible, like something out of a movie rather than real life. But the evidence was right there in my hands, a blood-red testing strip that couldn't lie. Maybe she hadn't meant to hurt everyone. Maybe it was just me she wanted gone. I remembered how she'd encouraged me to take extra helpings of the stuffing, how she'd seemed disappointed when I barely touched it. I made it through the rest of the evening somehow, smiling and nodding and pretending nothing had happened. But inside, I was crumbling. The woman I'd welcomed into my family, the woman I'd helped and supported and loved like my own daughter, had tried to poison me. The train ride home felt endless. Every stop, every delay, gave me more time to think about what I'd discovered. By the time I reached my apartment, I was exhausted and heartbroken and angrier than I'd been in years. I sat in my kitchen with the testing strip on the table in front of me, proof of a betrayal so deep it took my breath away. All those years of being pushed aside, dismissed, replaced, it had been leading to this. Sarah didn't just want me out of the kitchen, she wanted me gone entirely. I cried that night for the first time since David's funeral. Not just sad tears, but angry ones. Furious tears for every slight, every dismissal, every time I'd been made to feel like I was asking for too much when all I wanted was to matter to my own family. But underneath the anger was something else. A small, growing flame of determination. If Sarah thought she could get rid of me this easily, she was wrong. If my family thought I was just going to fade away quietly, they had another thing coming. I wasn't ready to disappear yet. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made my coffee, sat by my window, and made a decision. I was going to confront Sarah about what I'd found. Not accusations or drama, just the truth laid out plainly. I called Michael first, asking him to meet me at a neutral location, the coffee shop downtown where we used to go when he was in college, and needed to talk through his problems. He sounded surprised, but agreed. When he arrived, he looked tired and a little defensive, as if he already knew this conversation wouldn't be pleasant. "Mom, I hope you're not going to complain about yesterday. Sarah worked really hard on that dinner." I pulled the testing strip out of my purse and placed it on the table between us. "Michael, I need you to look at this." He frowned. "What is it?" "It's a chemical testing strip. I used it on the stuffing yesterday. This color means there was something toxic in the food Sarah served." His expression went from confusion to disbelief to anger in the space of a few seconds. "Mom, that's insane. You're accusing Sarah of trying to poison people? Do you hear how crazy that sounds? I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm showing you evidence that something was wrong with that food. Something dangerous. Those strips probably expired years ago, or you used them wrong. Sarah would never—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I can't believe you'd even suggest something like this. Your wife has been pushing me out of this family for years, Michael. Yesterday was just the culmination." "Pushing you out? Mom, you're being dramatic. Sarah respects you. She wanted to give you a break from cooking, and somehow you've twisted that into some kind of conspiracy." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a man who had chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's well-being, who had decided it was easier to dismiss my concerns than to consider they might be valid. "When was the last time you called me just to talk?" I asked quietly. "Not because you needed something, but just because you wanted to hear my voice?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I call you all the time. You call when you need money, when you need a babysitter, when Sarah sends you to deliver some message that she doesn't want to give me herself. When was the last time you asked how I'm doing?" He faltered, and I saw a flash of guilt cross his face before the defensiveness returned. "Look, Mom, we're busy. The kids have activities. Sarah has her job. I'm working 60 hours a week. That doesn't mean we don't care about you. Doesn't it?" We sat in silence for a moment. Then Michael reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "Mom, I think you might be depressed, lonely. Maybe you should talk to someone. A professional." There it was. The gentle suggestion that I was the problem. That my hurt feelings and legitimate concerns were just symptoms of mental instability that could be fixed with therapy and medication. I pulled my hand away. I'm not depressed, Michael. I'm awake. For the first time in years, I'm seeing clearly. Seeing what? That I've been so afraid of losing you that I've let myself be treated like I don't matter. That I've given and given and given. And all it's gotten me is pushed further and further to the edges of your life. He didn't deny it. He couldn't, because it was true. I left the coffee shop that day knowing I couldn't count on my son to protect me or even to believe me. Whatever was happening in my family, I was going to have to handle it alone. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I went to see a lawyer. The legal aid office was in downtown Queens, a place that helped seniors with problems they couldn't afford to solve on their own. I explained the situation to a young woman named Maria, showing her the testing strip and describing the pattern of isolation and financial exploitation I'd been experiencing. "Mrs. Patterson," she said gently, "do you have any other evidence of this alleged poisoning attempt? Witnesses, perhaps?" "No. Everyone else was in the living room when I tested the food." "And the strip itself, how old is it? When was it last calibrated?" I admitted I wasn't sure. The strips had been sitting in my purse for months, maybe longer. Maria was kind but realistic. Without more concrete evidence, it would be very difficult to prove intentional poisoning. These testing strips aren't forensic quality, and their accuracy decreases over time. However, if you feel unsafe around your family members, we can discuss protective measures. Protective measures? Restraining orders if necessary. Changes to your will or financial accounts to prevent exploitation. Documentation of incidents in case you need to establish a pattern of abuse later. The word abuse hit me like a physical blow. Was that what this was? Had I been so focused on keeping my family together that I'd failed to recognize I was being abused? I left the lawyer's office with pamphlets about elder abuse and a list of resources for seniors in crisis. The walk home felt different somehow, like I was seeing my neighborhood through new eyes. Other elderly women walking slowly, carrying groceries, looking tired and invisible. How many of them were going through something similar? How many were being discarded by families who saw them as burdens rather than human beings deserving of love and respect? That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and really looked at my financial situation for the first time in months. Between the money I'd given Michael and Sarah over the years and my own living expenses, my savings were dangerously low. If something happened to me, if I got sick or needed care, I wouldn't have enough money to take care of myself. I'd given so much to ensure my family's financial security that I'd ignored my own. The next few days passed quietly. Michael didn't call, which wasn't surprising. Sarah certainly didn't reach out. I was surprised to realize that their silence didn't hurt as much as I expected. Instead, I felt something like relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring, hoping for a crumb of attention from people who saw me as an obligation rather than a person they genuinely wanted to spend time with. I started taking walks around the neighborhood, really exploring for the first time since I'd moved to this apartment after David died. I'd been so focused on my family's needs that I'd never bothered to build a life of my own here. There was a community center 6 blocks away that offered classes for seniors. Art therapy, book clubs, cooking lessons, computer training. A whole world of people my age who were living full, engaging lives instead of sitting around waiting for their children to remember they existed. I signed up for a watercolor painting class that met twice a week. The instructor, Margaret, was about my age and had the kind of confidence I'd lost somewhere along the way. She treated the students like adults with valuable experiences and perspectives, not like elderly children who needed to be managed. "What draws you to painting, Helen?" she asked during my first class. "I don't know," I admitted. "I used to love art when I was young, but I gave it up when I got married. Family responsibilities, you know." "Well, you're here now," she said simply. "That's what matters." It was such a small thing, but it felt revolutionary. Someone was interested in what I wanted, what brought me joy, without any expectation of what I could do for them in return. I started spending more time at the community center, joining the book club and volunteering to help with their holiday food drive. The people there knew me as Helen, the watercolor painter. Helen, who always brought excellent coffee cake to book club meetings. Helen, who had strong opinions about contemporary fiction. Not Helen the ATM, or Helen the free babysitter, or Helen whose feelings didn't matter as long as she kept quiet. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, Michael finally called. "Mom, Sarah's been asking about you. She's worried because you haven't been returning her texts." I hadn't even realized Sarah had been texting me. I'd grown so accustomed to being ignored that I'd stopped checking for messages from my family. "I've been busy," I said. "Busy with what?" Something in his tone annoyed me. The surprise, as if he couldn't imagine what his elderly mother could possibly be busy with. "I've been taking art classes, and I joined a book club. I'm volunteering at the community center." "That's great, Mom. Really great. But Sarah was hoping you could babysit Jake this weekend. They have a work party." There it was, the real reason for the call. They needed something from me, so suddenly my welfare mattered. "I'm sorry, Michael. I have plans this weekend." "Plans?" "Mom, it's just for a few hours, and Jake really wants to see you." The old me would have canceled whatever I was doing to help out. The old me would have felt guilty for having plans that conflicted with my family's needs. But this new person I was becoming, she had different priorities. "I said I can't do it, Michael. I'm sure you'll figure something else out." The silence stretched between us. I could almost hear him trying to process this unfamiliar version of his usually accommodating mother. Is this about Thanksgiving? Because Sarah really did just want to help. I hung up. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, like jumping off a cliff and discovering you could fly. My phone rang again immediately. This time it was Sarah. "Helen, Michael told me you're upset about something. I think we need to talk." Her voice had that carefully controlled tone she used when she was trying to manage a situation. The same voice she probably used with difficult clients at her marketing job. "I don't think we have much to talk about, Sarah." "Of course we do. We're family, and I'm concerned about you. Michael says you're acting strangely, not wanting to help out with Jake, making up stories about the food at Thanksgiving." "Making up stories?" "Helen, you accused me of trying to poison you. That's a very serious accusation to make without evidence." Evidence. As if the deep red testing strip wasn't evidence enough. As if years of being systematically excluded and dismissed weren't evidence of a pattern. "You're right, Sarah. I don't have the kind of evidence that would stand up in court. But I know what I tested, and I know what that color means. Those strips could have been faulty, or contaminated. Or maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you made a mistake thinking I'd keep quiet about it." Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. "I think you need professional help, Helen. This paranoia, this hostility, it's not healthy. And it's not fair to Michael and the children." Paranoia, hostility. The same words abusers always use to discredit their victims. I'd read about it in those pamphlets from the lawyer's office. "What's not fair," I said quietly, "is the way you've treated me for 15 years. What's not fair is taking my money and my help and my love and giving me nothing but contempt in return. I have never—" "What's not fair," I continued, my voice getting stronger, "is trying to erase me from my own family's traditions and then expecting me to be grateful for the privilege of being ignored. You're being dramatic. What's not fair is whatever you put in that stuffing that turned my testing strip red." This time, the silence was different. Longer, more careful. "I don't know what you think you're proving," Sarah said finally. "But if you keep making these accusations, I'm going to have to limit your contact with the grandchildren. I won't have them exposed to this kind of instability." There it was, the threat I'd been dreading for years, the ultimate weapon in her arsenal. My relationship with Emma and Jake held hostage to ensure my compliance. "Sarah," I said, and my voice was steady as bedrock, "if you try to keep me away from my grandchildren based on lies and manipulation, I will fight you with everything I have left." I hung up and turned off my phone. For the next week, I lived in a strange kind of peace. No calls demanding my time or money or services. No text messages with passive-aggressive guilt trips. No family emergencies that somehow required my immediate financial assistance. Just me and my watercolor paints, and the book I was reading for book club, and the quiet satisfaction of a life lived on my own terms. But I knew it couldn't last. Families like mine didn't give up control that easily. The confrontation came on a cold Saturday morning in December. I was getting ready for my art class when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I could see Michael, Sarah, and both children standing in my hallway. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said. "Then talk." "Can we come in? It's freezing out here." I looked at Emma and Jake, both bundled in expensive winter coats, both looking uncomfortable and confused. They didn't deserve to be used as weapons in this war between the adults. But I wasn't going to let my concern for them override my need to protect myself. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked through the gap in the door. "This has gone on long enough, Mom. Sarah's been patient, but your accusations and your behavior are affecting the whole family. The kids are asking why Grandma Helen won't talk to us anymore. I'll talk to Emma and Jake anytime they want. Your wife is another matter. Mom, please, just let us in, and we can work this out." I looked at their faces. Michael's frustrated impatience, Sarah's cold calculation, the children's confusion. And I realized something important. I didn't want to work it out. Not if working it out meant going back to the way things were before, with me accepting crumbs and calling it love. "Michael, do you believe me about the stuffing?" He glanced at Sarah before answering. "Mom, I think you believe what you're saying. But those testing strips aren't reliable evidence of anything. Do you believe your wife tried to poison me?" "Of course not. That's ridiculous." "Then we don't have anything to work out." Sarah stepped forward. "Helen, I brought the children here because they miss you. But if you're not willing to have a reasonable conversation, if you're going to keep making these paranoid accusations, then I think it's best if we limit contact until you get the help you need." "What kind of help do you think I need, Sarah? Clearly you're struggling with depression, maybe early dementia. These conspiracy theories, this hostility." "Stop." My voice cut through her clinical assessment like a blade. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me into thinking I'm mentally incompetent just because I've finally started standing up for myself." "Mom," Michael said, glancing nervously at the neighbors who might be listening, "you're making a scene." "Am I?" Because from where I'm standing, the scene is 3 adults using 2 children as shields while they try to manipulate an elderly woman into accepting abuse. Sarah's carefully composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. "You're being ridiculous. No one is abusing you. Taking my money while excluding me from family decisions isn't abuse? We never asked for that money. You offered. Isolating me from my grandchildren when I don't comply with your demands isn't abuse? We're trying to protect them from instability. Attempting to poison me isn't abuse? I never—" Sarah stopped herself, but not before I saw the flash of panic in her eyes. Jake tugged on his mother's coat. "Mom, what's Grandma talking about? What poison?" Sarah's face went white. Michael looked between us, finally beginning to understand that something more serious was happening here than hurt feelings and family drama. "Sarah," he said slowly, "what is she talking about?" "Nothing. Your mother is having paranoid delusions. We should go." "Me?" But Jake wasn't easily dismissed. He was 12 now, old enough to understand that adults sometimes lied to protect him from things he needed to know. "Grandma Helen, did someone try to poison you?" I looked down at my grandson through the gap in the door, This sweet boy who still called me on my birthday and sent me drawings he made in art class. He deserved the truth, even if the adults in his life preferred comfortable lies. I think so, sweetheart. At Thanksgiving dinner. Who would do that? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire, visible and toxic and impossible to ignore. Sarah grabbed Jake's arm. We're leaving, now. No, wait, Michael said. Mom, show me those testing strips again. Michael, don't encourage this. Show me the strips, Mom. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something I'd been hoping for without daring to expect it. Doubt. The first crack in his absolute faith in his wife's innocence. Wait here, I said. I came back with the testing strips and the pamphlets from the legal aid office, handing them through the gap in the door. Michael examined the red-stained strips while Sarah tried to avoid looking at them. These could be faulty, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. They could be, or they could be accurate. Mom, he said quietly, if you really believe someone tried to poison you, why didn't you call the police? Because I wasn't sure. Because I didn't want to believe it. Because I was afraid you'd choose her over me anyway. The truth of that last statement hit all of us at the same time. Not just the possibility that Sarah might have done something terrible, but the deeper truth that I'd been conditioned to expect my own son to prioritize someone else's comfort over my safety. Emma spoke for the first time. Dad, can I see those? She was 16, taking AP chemistry, smart enough to understand what she was looking at. Michael handed her the strips reluctantly. These test for heavy metals and toxins, she said slowly. If they turned this red, there was definitely something in the food that shouldn't have been there. Sarah snatched the strips away. Emma, those things are old and unreliable. Your grandmother is confused. I'm not confused. I looked directly at Sarah through the door gap. I know exactly what happened at Thanksgiving. The question is whether my family is going to keep pretending it didn't. This is insane, Sarah said, but her voice was shaking now. Michael, we're leaving. I won't stand here and be accused of attempted murder by a senile old woman. I'm not senile, I said calmly. And you're not leaving until we finish this conversation. You can't keep us here. You came to my door, Sarah. You brought my grandchildren here to manipulate me into accepting your abuse. You don't get to leave until you explain why that stuffing tested positive for toxins. Michael was staring at his wife with growing suspicion. Sarah, just answer the question. What did you put in the stuffing? Nothing. I followed the recipe exactly. Which recipe? What do you mean? Which recipe did you use? One you found online? One from a cookbook? Or did you make it up as you went along? Sarah's composure was cracking. I don't remember exactly. I combined a few different ideas. What ingredients did you use? The usual things. Bread, celery, onions, herbs. What herbs? I don't know. Whatever was in the spice cabinet. Jake looked up at his mother with confusion. Mom, why don't you remember what you put in the food? That innocent question from her own child seemed to break something in Sarah. Her carefully maintained facade crumbled, leaving behind something raw and desperate. Fine, Anushi said, her voice sharp with anger. You want the truth? I may have made a mistake with the ingredients. I was trying something new, and I might have added something that didn't belong there. But it wasn't intentional, and it certainly wasn't poison. What did you add? I asked. The silence stretched between us. Sarah's breathing was rapid, panicked. Michael was staring at her as if he'd never seen her before. Sarah, he said quietly, what did you put in the stuffing? It was an accident. What did you put in the stuffing? She broke. Rat poison, okay? I thought it was a spice container. I added maybe half a teaspoon before I realized my mistake, and by then the stuffing was already mixed, and I couldn't separate it out. But it was a tiny amount, not enough to really hurt anyone. People probably wouldn't even notice. The confession hit like a lightning strike. Emma gasped. Jake took a step back from his mother. Michael's face went gray. "You put rat poison in the food," Michael said slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe the words coming out of his mouth. "It was an accident. And you served it anyway. It was just a tiny amount. You served food with rat poison in it to your family, to your children. I was going to throw it away, but then everyone was arriving and I didn't have time to make more, and I thought if I just served small portions it would be fine." "You thought it would be fine to feed poison to your children?" Sarah was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her perfectly composed exterior. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Helen always made these perfect dinners, and everyone compared everything I cooked to her recipes, and I just wanted to prove I could do it better. When I realized I'd made the mistake, I panicked. I thought maybe no one would notice, or maybe it would just taste a little off and I could blame it on trying a new recipe." "Mom," Emma said, her voice small and horrified, "we all ate that stuffing. Just a little bit. And you're all fine, aren't you? Nobody got sick." "Because I barely ate any," I said. "Because something tasted wrong and I trusted my instincts. How much did everyone else have?" Michael was thinking, remembering. "Jake had 2 helpings. Emma had some. I had some. You encouraged us all to try it, especially Jake because he usually doesn't like stuffing." "Oh, God," Sarah whispered. "Jake, baby, are you feeling okay? Have you felt sick at all since Thanksgiving?" Jake was staring at his mother with an expression I'd never seen on his young face. Betrayal, confusion, fear. "You poisoned me. It was an accident. But you gave it to me anyway?" Sarah reached for him, but he stepped back into his grandfather's space about a foot away from the door. "Jake, sweetie, I would never intentionally hurt you. You knew there was poison in the food, and you gave it to me anyway." The simplicity of a child's logic cut through all of Sarah's rationalizations and excuses. She had known the food was contaminated, and she had served it to her family rather than admit her mistake. Emma was crying now too, but her tears were angry. "Mom, how could you do that? What if we'd gotten really sick? What if we'd died?" "You weren't going to die from such a small amount. You don't know that." Michael's voice was rising. "You're not a doctor or a chemist. You had no idea what that amount of poison could do to us, especially to the kids." "I researched it online." "You researched it? So you knew it was dangerous and you served it anyway?" Sarah's story was unraveling in real time. What had started as claims of accident and panic were revealing themselves as calculated decisions to cover up a potentially deadly mistake. "Michael, please. You have to understand." "I understand perfectly. You put poison in our food, you served it to our children, and then you tried to make my mother think she was going crazy when she discovered what you'd done." "I never said she was crazy. You said she was paranoid, delusional, having a breakdown. You tried to use her accusations to get her declared mentally incompetent. I was trying to protect the family from scandal. You were trying to protect yourself from consequences." I watched this confrontation unfold with a mixture of vindication and heartbreak. I'd been right about the poison, but being right didn't erase the years of gaslighting and manipulation, didn't undo the damage to my relationship with my son and grandchildren, didn't give me back the respect and trust I'd lost. Emma was the first to break the terrible silence that followed Michael's accusation. "Dad, I want to go stay with Grandma Helen." "Emma, honey, that's not necessary. I don't feel safe with Mom right now. She gave us poison and then lied about it. What if she does something like that again?" Sarah was sobbing openly now. "Emma, please. I would never intentionally hurt you. I love you more than anything in the world." "Then why did you give me poison?" It was the question that cut to the heart of everything. Love was supposed to protect, not harm. Love was supposed to choose safety over pride, truth over convenience. A mother who truly loved her children wouldn't have served them contaminated food to avoid admitting a mistake. Michael looked at his wife, really looked at her, and I could see the moment he understood what kind of person he'd married. What kind of person he'd defended against his own mother for 15 years. "Sarah, I need you to go stay at your sister's for a while," he said quietly. "Michael, no, please. I can't trust you right now. I need time to think about what this means for our marriage, for our family, and the kids need space to process this." "You're choosing her over me," Sarah said, pointing at me through the door gap. "Your paranoid mother over your wife. I'm choosing the safety of our children over someone who put poison in their food." The simplicity of it, the clarity, seemed to surprise him. For years, he'd been forced to choose between his wife's demands and his mother's feelings. Now he was faced with choosing between his wife's reputation and his children's safety. There was no contest. I unchained my door and opened it fully for the first time in this whole confrontation. "Emma, Jake, do you want to come in for some hot chocolate?" They nodded, stepping past their mother without looking at her. Sarah made one last desperate attempt to control the situation. "If you take my children away from me, I'll fight you in court. I'll hire the best lawyers money can buy." "With what money?" Michael asked. "The money you've been taking from my mother for years. The money you've been spending on clothes and vacations while asking her to pay for our children's school supplies?" Sarah's face crumpled. She'd played every card she had: manipulation, gaslighting, threats, guilt, false accusations of mental illness, and lost every hand. She left finally, alone and defeated, her perfect Thanksgiving dinner revealed as what it truly was. A crime scene disguised as a family celebration. Emma and Jake sat at my small kitchen table while I made hot chocolate the way I'd done when they were smaller. Real chocolate, real milk, marshmallows if they wanted them. Simple, comforting, safe. "Grandma," Jake said quietly, "I'm sorry Mom tried to poison you." "I'm sorry she poisoned you too, sweetheart." Emma was looking at the testing strips, still sitting on my counter. "These really work." "They have their limitations, but yes, they detect the presence of toxic substances." "You probably saved our lives," she said. "If you hadn't tested the food, we might have eaten more of it." Michael stood in my doorway looking lost and exhausted. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have believed you from the beginning." "You couldn't have known? I should have trusted you. You've never lied to me, and she—" He shook his head. "How could I not see what kind of person she really was?" "Because you loved her, and because she was very good at making her behavior seem normal." We talked late into the night, all of us processing the revelation that had changed everything in the space of minutes. The children would stay with me for a few days while Michael figured out what came next. Sarah had agreed to a trial separation, with supervised visits with the children until she completed counseling and anger management. As I tucked Jake into David's old recliner, he'd refused the couch, insisting the chair was more comfortable. I thought about how different this day had been from what I'd expected when I woke up. I'd been prepared for another confrontation, another battle in the long war of attrition that had defined my relationship with Sarah. Instead, the truth had come out. Not because I'd forced it, but because Sarah's own guilt and desperation had betrayed her. The careful facade she'd maintained for 15 years had cracked under pressure, revealing the calculating and dangerous person underneath. Emma helped me make up the couch for herself, chatting about her chemistry class and how she wanted to major in forensic science when she went away to college next year. "Grandma, were you really scared that night? After you tested the food?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Not just about the poison, but about what it meant. About your mother wanting to hurt me badly enough to take such risks." "Are you scared now?" I thought about it. "No, I'm sad for all of us, especially for your dad. But I'm not scared anymore." "Good, because we need you. Dad's going to need help with everything, and Jake and I, We want to spend more time with you. Real time. Not just when Mom needs something. I'd love that, sweetheart. That night, lying in my own bed in my own apartment, surrounded by the gentle sounds of my grandchildren sleeping safely in my living room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the solid peace of standing in my truth and having it recognized, of protecting my family by protecting myself first. The phone rang early the next morning. Michael's voice was exhausted but clear. Mom, I've been thinking all night about everything that happened. Not just yesterday, but over the years. The way Sarah treated you, the way I let her treat you. I need to apologize for more than just not believing you about the poison. Michael, no, let me say this. I've been a terrible son. I let my wife push you out of our lives because it was easier than dealing with her jealousy and control issues. I took your money and your help and your love, and I gave you nothing but criticism and dismissal in return. I was crying, but they were good tears. Tears of relief and recognition and the possibility of healing. I want to make it right, he continued. I want us to be a real family again. I want the kids to know their grandmother, not just when they need something, but because you're important to us. Because we love you. I love you too, I whispered. I know you do. And I'm sorry it took something this terrible for me to remember what that means. Later that morning, Emma and Jake helped me cook breakfast. Nothing fancy. Just eggs and toast and real conversation. Emma told me about her boyfriend and her college applications. Jake showed me drawings he'd been making, intricate superhero comics with storylines he'd been developing for months. It struck me that I'd been missing out on their real lives for years, only getting the sanitized updates that Sarah approved of. These children were interesting, funny, creative people with their own thoughts and dreams and talents. I'd been so focused on the grandmother I wasn't allowed to be that I'd never discovered the grandmother I could become. Michael joined us for lunch, and we started talking about how to move forward. Sarah would be getting help, but regardless of whether their marriage survived, things would be different from now on. I would be part of their lives in a meaningful way. The children would be welcome in my home anytime they wanted to come. Family decisions would include my input and perspective. Most importantly, I would no longer be expected to buy my place in the family with money and services and silence. I would be valued for who I was, not what I could provide. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Sarah's betrayal had left wounds that would take time to heal. The family dynamics that had enabled her behavior would need to be addressed and changed. There would be legal issues to work through, custody arrangements to negotiate, therapy for everyone involved. But for the first time in years, I felt hope. Hope that I could have the loving relationship with my son and grandchildren that I'd always wanted. Hope that my voice would be heard and respected. Hope that the rest of my life could be about more than just surviving the loneliness and neglect. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my apartment watching the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, painting the buildings in shades of gold and rose. Emma is at my kitchen table doing homework. Jake is reading on the couch where he's spent at least 2 nights every week since that terrible Saturday when the truth came out. Michael stops by almost daily now, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to help with errands or repairs. He's like the son I remembered from his childhood, attentive, respectful, genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. Sarah and I haven't spoken since that day in my hallway, but I hear she's doing better. The counseling has helped her understand the roots of her need to control and manipulate others. Whether she and Michael can rebuild their marriage remains to be seen, but both children have a relationship with their mother again, supervised and structured but real. I've kept up with my art classes and joined a hiking group for seniors. I'm planning a trip to Italy this summer, something I've always wanted to do but never felt free to spend the money on. Emma wants to come with me for part of it, a graduation gift to herself and a chance to see the world through her grandmother's eyes. The community center has asked me to lead a support group for elderly people dealing with family conflicts. Apparently, my story isn't as unusual as I thought. There are a lot of us out there, parents and grandparents who've been pushed aside by families who see us as burdens rather than blessings. People who've confused enabling with love, who've given so much of themselves away that they forgot they had value beyond their usefulness to others. It feels good to help others find their voices and their worth. To share what I learned about the difference between being alone and being lonely, between being needed and being respected. I keep the testing strips in my purse still, not because I expect to need them again, but as a reminder that trusting my instincts was what saved me, that speaking my truth was what set me free, that refusing to accept unacceptable treatment was what brought my real family back to me. Sometimes Jake asks me about that Thanksgiving, about how I knew to test the food, about what would have happened if I hadn't. I tell him the truth, that I was lucky, that my years of volunteering prepared me to recognize danger, that fear and love motivated me to act when action was needed. But mostly I tell him that families are supposed to protect each other, not hurt each other. That love doesn't ask you to accept poison, literal or metaphorical. That keeping the peace isn't worth sacrificing your safety or your dignity. He's young, but he understands. Children often understand things that adults prefer to ignore. As I finish this story, sitting in my warm apartment with my grandson reading nearby and the sounds of the city humming beyond my windows, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where family members treated you as less valuable than you knew yourself to be? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself? Have you ever discovered that people you trusted didn't have your best interests at heart? If so, you're not alone. And you're not powerless. Your voice matters. Your safety matters. Your dignity matters. You don't have to accept crumbs and call it love. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is refusing to enable their worst impulses. Sometimes love means setting boundaries that protect everyone involved. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust your own instincts over other people's convenient lies. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Share it with others who might benefit from knowing that they're not crazy, they're not too sensitive, and they deserve better than they're getting. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult truths, and maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves before it's too late. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, you matter exactly as you are, regardless of what anyone else tells you. The sunset is almost over now, painting my walls in gentle pink light. Emma has finished her homework and is showing me pictures of colleges she's considering. Jake has fallen asleep over his book, peaceful and safe. This is what family is supposed to feel like. Not performed or purchased or demanded, but chosen and cherished and protected. It was worth fighting for. It was worth the pain of standing up for myself. It was worth discovering who I really am when I'm not trying to be what everyone else needs me to be. And that, my friends, is the most important lesson of all.